All right, welcome to Dicejunkies. This is Bloodact, and I have on screen with me Q, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Timothy Rose. You may know him for his work in The Dark Crystal. He also did Return to Oz, Muppet Christmas Carol, but also my passion. If you watch the show on a regular basis, he was a puppeteer in Star Wars. So, Mr. Rose, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
So I want to jump right into Star Wars because I'm a Star Warsaholic, but we're going to backtrack a little bit. And one of the shows that I think is extremely underrated, but I really loved at the time was The Dark Crystal. And you were the head performer for the Treasurer in The Dark Crystal. Can you give us your experiences on that set and how and what it meant to you?
Well, yeah, I performed the Treasure of Skeksis on set, but before that happened in the pre-production, I also built the radio-controlled heads for Jen and Kira and designed Batbirds and helped build the Skeksi costumes and did quite a few other things. Jim was very nervous about making the film good. It was the only time I ever worked on a film. We had the pre-production effectively ended up being about 4 years. Now, most films, the pre-production time is 4 to 6 months. And because he wanted everything to be as good as we could make it, we would build something, we'd do a screen test on it, and Jim would say, yeah, I like that. And I said, well, yeah, I liked it, but I think I could make it better. And he'd say, well, then go ahead and make it better. And you got the chance to have a second go and make it better and prove that you were right in the first place. And that's part of the reason why I think the film has had longevity. It's also because Jim Henson had what he called the magic moment. That's where you have a talented cast, you've got all these wonderful characters, you've got a really good technical department, wonderful sets, good script, and just trying to shoot the script, somebody will do something that will spark the rest of the people on set, and you'll end up shooting something on film that was better than what you started out trying to get. And Jim would do 20, 30, 40 takes or something, just waiting for that one take that had the magic moment in it. And most of his movies are edited together versions of magic moments.
Nice, cool.
Which is why they're so watchable.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember watching as a kid, and it seems like that Jim Henson in that film tried to talk up to kids, not down to kids. And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated by some of the things that he and George Lucas have done is we don't have to explain everything. Let the kids use their minds. Let them, immerse themselves and try to figure things out for themselves and don't over explain everything. But yeah, Jim Henson has done some phenomenal work, and the Dark Crystal, like I said, it has a cult following, and I didn't see the remake of it so much.
Did you know that originally it was shot in its original languages?
No, I didn't know that. So
when Jim first made the Dark Crystal, he did the Skeksis talking in Urskeks and the Podlings talking in Podling and all those, and it had subtitles. And basically, the producers said, or the distributors said, Americans won't read subtitles. If you want anybody to see this movie, you got to do it in English.
Wow, no, I didn't know that.
So we reshot it all in English.
Wow, cool. So you didn't dub over it; you just reshot everything.
Oh no! But two of the things, Jim was an absolute stickler or perfectionist on. To keep a puppet character alive, he has to have eye focus. Mm-hmm. When he's looking at you, you got to feel like he's looking straight at you. And the other one was mouth sync, that if he's saying a line of dialogue, you have to believe that that dialogue is coming out of that character's mouth. And to do that, you have to have perfect mouth sync.
Wow.
So he we reshot it all with perfect mouth sync and high focus and everything else he had to do. So
Wow, so that would explain why the budget was so high then.
yeah, and we were doing something that was very labor intensive and technical intensive, and
Yeah, because, were there more than one puppeteers, for the characters, or were they pretty much solo?
oh, the main Skeksis, there could be up to 6 people operating them. That
Wow.
was what was so magic about those characters, was that uh, animatronics, the puppets, are an entirely different way of performance from acting, because you're all working together to create this character. So the sum of the parts creates something that's better than the sum of the parts.
Yeah,
That's why I love the magic of the animatronics, magic of those characters at that time.
yeah,
The Skeksis had a little guy. Most of the guys you've heard, Kenny Baker, from R2D2,
yeah.
he was a Skeksis. The establishing shots were done with little guys in full bodysuit costumes walking into the positions. And then when they got to the positions, we'd take up those sections of floor and we'd get into the floor, because the Skeksis was only about 5 foot tall. But when I operate the Skeksis, I'm 6 foot and I've got my arm over my head to operate the mouth. So they had to put 4 foot of me into the floor to keep me 5 foot tall. So
Yeah, the Skeksis were pretty big, but that's gotta be uncomfortable being contorted underneath, flooring and then trying to twist your arm around and then try to match everything up. That's gotta
mm,
be a challenge for
we discovered, well, I discovered sensory deprivation for the first time,
wow.
because you're entirely enclosed in the costume for hours. It took a long time to dress them, so we tended to go in first thing in the morning, come out at lunchtime, go back in for the afternoon shoot, and come out at the end of the day. And there's large periods of time when the lighting's being done, when the set's being redressed, when you're in costume but doing absolutely nothing.
Wow.
And we discovered that sometimes when they'd call turnover, half the Skeksis would come alive and the other half wouldn't, because the people in the costumes, their brains had just drifted away.
Wow.
Despite their best efforts to stay focused, there was nothing to focus on. So one of the things, the cameraman, very, very lovely man, even though he didn't need to, when he wasn't filming, he would sit on his camera and he would just crank it and pan the camera from side to side, because we all had a monitor inside our costumes. So we
Uh-huh.
could at least see why we were waiting so long. He would basically shoot a little movie for us to watch on our TV set so that we wouldn't completely lose our focus and disappear off someplace. So it's very,
Nice.
very kind to consider us in there. So.
Oh, absolutely.
I wonder if that added to the surreal feel of the movie that y'all the Skeksis, because I always thought the Skeksis pulled off an incredibly alien feel, and maybe it's because y'all were kind of already out there. Like it's like you weren't really thinking like normal people anymore because you'd been in this suit all day and you're just kind of like,
Yeah.
because it
Well, as
definitely
I
felt a
said, with any of
disconnect.
these animatronic characters, we aren't ourselves.
Hmm.
We
Right.
are there. We are there to create this other character, and it could be 6 of us creating this other character. When the magic really happens is when you're first doing it, you have to do it by the numbers. Okay, when I say this, I want the eyebrows to go up. I want the cheeks to puff out. I want the arms to do whatever. But as you begin to learn who your character is that you're bringing alive, you no longer have to direct your crew anymore. All you have to do is start moving and start talking, and everybody knows what that character will do in his life. So you create something that stays with you forever, really.
Indeed.
That's good teamwork, actually.
Man,
Oh, it's great fun.
Oh, absolutely.
very few places in life where you can get teamwork quite like that.
I don't
Maybe in
imagine.
the army when
Yeah,
you're all trying to keep yourselves alive. I think those guys probably work together that closely. But
yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's almost kind of like for a sports reference in football, an offensive lineman will know that when a quarterback utters this audible, we're supposed to move together as a unit to do this package or that package, but it takes time and training. You can't just pull five guys off the street and do what you're talking about. It takes
mm,
years to develop that kind of camaraderie, that understanding that if Tim says this or if he moves a puppet this way, then I need to adjust the facial expressions to match. So yeah, that's interesting because we don't always get all behind the scenes information like that. We just see the product on television or in the film theater. But
exactly. And when you forget about us completely, that means we've done our job really well.
absolutely.
If all you're seeing is that character and believing that character is alive, then we've done our job.
I literally didn't even think of the concept of puppeteers for the Skeksis. So y'all were a roaring success because I literally like when I said like what puppets like puppeteers. It's like wow, when I think of that movie, I literally forget their puppets even in retrospect, which is about the best compliment I think I can give, which is like, oh yeah,
Mm,
there would have had to be people puppeteering that like those, but it just you get so immersed in the environment and the way they move and just everything going on that you literally go like, that was that was puppets. Like I literally forget until I think about it. I had to actively go. Technically, there's people underneath moving these
mm.
um
And it was
individuals.
all done in camera, so we weren't even using the green screen or any of that in those
Hmm.
days. So
I
the
love
the
practical effects.
degree of pre-planning and execution that you had to go through so that something could happen in 4 seconds and just be taken for granted was phenomenal.
Take it for granted.
I
but
didn't
you
mean
want
taken
them
for granted,
to.
so that you could appreciate what we were wanting you to appreciate instead of seeing what we were doing to make you appreciate it.
That's the ultimate victory. It's just like with the story. We've interviewed some writers, and I've said, the greatest moment of a movie, a show, or any story is when the person observing it forgets it's a movie or a book or a story. They're so immersed that it's no longer. They're thinking, "What a nice plot." It's literally a great criticism I gave of a particular show, which I won't bring up because, we it's on it's on a place that we're going to try to be nice to for once. Uh, uh, but basically, I could not get immersed. My constant criticism was that I kept going, man, I don't like this actress's performance. And that's bad because if I keep looking at this person and seeing an actress, and there's a new actress to me, so no prejudgments. It was just I could tell
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
acting. You get what I'm saying. You've been in the business way long. When you look at somebody, you go, that person's acting, and thus they're
Yeah.
taking me out of the story. I'm looking at
There's
an
there's a
actress.
few there's a few you would forgive, like Sean Connery. Sean Connery is always Sean Connery, but you don't care because you love him so much.
Yes,
that, but yes, for the most part, you want the actor to be the character and not the actor. I mean, that's why all through my career, especially for some reason in commercials, we would build these fabulous animatronic characters, and we'd get in there to perform them, and we'd be introduced to these actors, and it's like, well, who's this? Oh, they're the people that's going to do the character. I said, yeah, but they're actors. They're not animatronics people. Yes, but we want to get a proper performance out of it. And the problem, there are actors, as they discovered on the Muppet Show. When they had the live actors come and do the Muppet Show, they always had the guest star every week. Some episodes you never saw because the guest star was unable to relate to the puppets. They were unable to treat the puppets as real. They would always talk to the people under the puppets instead of talking to Kermit. I say the main difference between suit artists or animatronic artists or puppeteers or whatever you want to call us is that for us, the character we're portraying is what's important. That is who we want you to see. Whereas when actors try to do puppets, they always have to insist on letting you know that they're working hard to create this puppet. They can't they can't let go of their egos and let the puppet be the star. They always have to let you know, I'm under here, you know, or whatever. So although they think they're going to be so much better than a puppeteer, they ain't in a lot of situations.
I agree completely. This goes to the famous, and I'm trying not to set off Blood Axe. I got to be careful here. I'm not. We're talking about Judge Dredd, not the other scenario. So don't you get started. But the constant need to show their face when they're playing a masked character is like. But this has been an old one. That's why I'm telling them not to get set off in a particular one. Because I mean, even like that is obviously why actors make terrible superheroes, because some superheroes do not show their face. And it's
Mhm.
amazing, but I found out that some of them have it in their literal contract that it's like, you've got to show my face. And I'm like, but I don't want to see you. I want to see the character you're playing. I don't.
Yeah.
And I say Judge Dredd just because, like, between the two movies that came out, I am a big Sylvester Stallone. I'm an older guy, love Sly, but I think his movie, if he'd have kept that helmet on, it would have made that movie just so much better. And then another
Yeah.
actor comes along who isn't Sylvester Stallone, and honestly, don't even know who that guy is now. But he did a better
Me
job because
too.
he kept his helmet on. And I'm like, you let yourself get outdone by somebody that's probably not as big an actor as you because you wanted to show your face.
Actually, he's a huge actor. It's Carl Urban.
Who's that? You know who
From
that? You know who Carl Urban is? He's the best Judge Dredd I ever seen because he
no,
kept his mask on, his helmet in
you
that
don't.
case.
Okay.
If you
All
gave me
right.
some stuff, I would. But my point is, I don't want to know him because I actually respect him for being willing to keep his helmet on. And I'm worried if you mention other roles, you'll ruin it for me because I'll be like, "Well, I hated that movie."
No, there was one movie he did, and I know we're taking a rabbit hole, but
We do that.
that I was so excited about and was disappointed in. So, but yeah, you know who he is. But we're going to switch gears because we have Mr. Rose with us talking about his career, and you mentioned the Muppets, and I love the Muppet Christmas Carol. That's actually one of my favorite films for the holidays. Between that and Christmas Vacation, which you can see in my
I've
taste.
I've met a lot of people at conventions who come up and say that they love Muppets Christmas Carol, and it's become such a thing for them that they put it on the TV while they're decorating the Christmas tree just to help them get into the spirit of Christmas. And I don't think there could be much better compliment to a movie than that, to want it in your Christmas every Christmas.
Oh, absolutely. And I grew up on the Muppet Show. I remember watching it in as a kid, and I was just wowed by everything because also as a huge Star Wars fan when Mark Hamill showed up with C-3PO and R2. I mean, it really kind of sold me on the Muppet Show at that point. And then
That was such a fabulous, that's a classic episode of the Muppet Show with Gonzo and his Vader mask, with his nose inside the Vader mask and everything. I could watch that over and over and over again.
yeah, and Piggy playing the part of Leia, and Mark Hamill being kind of reluctant, but then joining in when she threatens him. So yeah, no, it's uh, and so yeah, the Muppet Christmas Carol was is one of those things that the Christmas Carol story is being told for generations, and it's a more updated version, in my opinion. So it's something that I'm able to watch with my kids who are younger, and they can get into it. But if I put on one of the older versions of a Christmas Carol, they're like, "What's this?" Or if I put on Scrooged, one of my 9-year-olds will be terrified of some of the ghosts. So this is a clean, easy way to have family fun, like you said, while you're decorating the tree or while you're cooking Christmas dinner. That you can stay in the festive spirit, but also have good family time. So, which puppets do you recall that you were operating on that film?
Right. I was heavily involved in all of the rats in the closing down of Scrooge's offices for Christmas Eve,
Mm-hmm.
which was great fun. I did Well, actually, that's one of my favorite Frank Oz stories came from that. When they did the Muppet Show, of course, the main performers, Frank and Jim Henson, they each did about 4 or 5 characters each,
Hmm.
and they just never put them in the same scene. So when we were doing the movies, and you'd get more than one of their characters appearing in the same scene, then they would choose the one that they would perform, and you would get to perform one of the others. So it was in Fozziwig's factory. They were having their Christmas party, and Miss Piggy was in the scene, and Fozzie Bear was in the scene. So Frank was doing Miss Piggy, and I was doing Fozzie Bear, and I was extremely nervous about it because Frank is the most perfectionist puppeteer you will ever meet in your life. So I was really trying to do Fozzie as I thought Frank would do Fozzie, and that he would appreciate my performance. And we did the take of it, and he came over to me and he said, Tim, too much, back it off. You're doing too much with Fozzie. I don't like it. I said, oh, sorry, Frank. I really didn't mean to do that. I'll try to do better. So we did take 2, and I did less. I kept him animated, but I did less. And at the end of the take, he came over, Tim, too much, still too much. So I did less in the next take after that. Then he came back and said, Tim, too much. And by this time, I was so frustrated because he wasn't telling me what to do. He was just telling me what not to do. I was so frustrated. I said, right, the next take, I'm going to ruin the shot just as a standing protest of I need help here because I don't know what to do now. So when they turned over cameras, the whole room was animated. In the middle of them, there was Fozzie Bear looking like he was on a stick, not moving, totally immobile, static. And at the end of the take, Frank came over and he said, Tim, that was perfect. That was just what I wanted from you. he used to love to bust the chops better than anybody else.
Wow.
I did Animal on the drums there too. That was great fun.
Oh man,
But
Animal, yeah.
I think one of my favorite stories, Michael Caine only did the movie because he wanted to do a movie that his grandchildren could watch, or he could watch with his grandchildren, because most of his films were for an older age group.
Right.
Well, he did this scene where the ghost of Christmas past takes him to the graveyard, and he sees the young lady that he was supposed to marry, but he didn't marry her because he didn't think he had enough money yet, or he had all these reasons why they shouldn't get married. And he had a song to sing, and Michael Caine is not a singer by any stretch of the imagination, but he had this song to sing. And so he's standing about 3 foot away from this young actress that couldn't hear him or wasn't supposed to be able to hear him. And he did such a beautiful job with that song that 200 film technicians were in tears on set.
Wow.
And when we went to the crew screening, the scene wasn't in the movie. And I ran up to Brian because Jim Henson was no longer with us at this point. And I said, Brian, what are you doing? Film technicians are the most hardened, cynical bunch you could ever see. And Michael Caine had them all crying their eyes out in that scene. And you didn't put it in the movie. He said, well, it was too adult. This movie's for kids. And I said, not one of those children in that cinema has come there without their parents bringing them there. You should have left it in for the parents.
Yeah.
And I think somebody told me on one of the DVDs they put it back in the credits or someplace.
I've seen it. It's
they never
really
did.
good. I mean, I think
What?
I've seen it. I think I've seen that song. There's some cut of it out there. I'm almost sure of the song.
In one of the DVDs, it's like they show it as a roll while the credits are going or something at the end, but it's not in its position in the movie.
No, it's not. It's not. But I remember when I saw it, I was just like, "Whoa, that was intense!" Like
the first time Michael Caine came on set, we were all standing. The camera's there. He's in front of the camera, and you all have to stand back another 10, 15 feet so you don't make noise or ruin sound or anything like that. And we're standing back there and we're watching it. And the first day we're all really excited because Michael Caine's here, Michael Caine, And we're watching it and we couldn't help it. We said, for a guy that gets paid as much money as he gets paid, you'd think he'd make more of an effort, wouldn't you? And what Jim had always done and Brian carried on was anybody who wanted to could always come to the dailies. We could always go see the filming from the previous day to check our own work, to see anybody else's work, just to enjoy this movie that we're making. It's such a brilliant thing, and they're about the only people who allow the actors and technicians to do that. Nobody else lets you into that screening room. Anyway, so we all go and we sit down and we watch the previous day's filming, and we see the scene where we thought the overpaid Michael Caine could do more. And when we saw him on screen, we realized that what he was doing, he wasn't performing to the technicians behind the camera. He was performing the exact distance between him and the 4 foot to that lens to the millions of people watching him on the screen. And when you saw him from the same distance as the lens, he was brilliant. Whereas if you saw him 15 foot back, he looked like he wasn't doing anything at all. So that's the difference between stage acting and cinema acting, you see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Again, it's behind the scenes look that we as the audience don't get to understand, but it's not as simple as just going and saying some lines and doing some emotions. You actually have to have some understanding of the technology you're working with, and I found that really interesting. That's very fascinating.
I love that he's a brilliant actor, but in his autobiography, he said the trick is, as an actor, you're trying to get the maximum amount of screen time. Editors will always cut you on a blink. So he says, don't blink your eyes. Now, of course, his understanding of acting went well beyond that. But in terms of what he was going to tell anybody about what he knew, that was it. Just don't blink your eyes and they can't edit you out. I loved it. Anyway, the Marley Brothers, played by Statler and Waldorf.
Oh, I love Statler and Waldorf.
Statler and Waldorf.
Right. Now, Statler and Waldorf were played by Jim Henson and Richard Hunt.
Okay.
Now, what people don't appreciate was that by the time we were doing Muppet's Christmas Carol, both those gentlemen were now dead. So Statler and Waldorf were the ghosts playing the ghosts of the Marley Brothers.
Yes.
It was kind of a little inside joke for the Muppet people.
Which actually is very appropriate because of the situation of the original Puppeteers, but yeah, I remember them as being the apparitions in that film. But Statler and Waldorf are named after, I think, hotels in New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But their jokes in the original Muppet Show had me rolling as a kid. And now they're on Disney Plus. I pulled it up and started watching.
With a disclaimer that, in case we've offended anybody, anywhere, at any time, in any language, we have to now have disclaimers. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That when I first saw that disclaimer, I was like, "What are they talking about?" And then I saw it was a episode that was kind of stereotyping some kind of, I think it was an Arabian character or something. I'm like, "Oh, this is what it's about." Okay, now I understand. But
I'll tell you what I had. I was at a convention in Sweden, and the promoter comes over and he says, "Failure Howard the Duck Pictures." I said, "Why? Nobody remembers that movie." He says, "Are you kidding? In Sweden, it's bigger than Star Wars." So he gets me the pictures. Sure enough, everybody's buying my Howard the Duck pictures. the Swedish fans, one of them comes up and he says, "I see on IMDb that you work for the Muppets." I said, yes, I did for several years. He said, "Please, can you explain what makes the Swedish chef so funny?" I went, "Oh, is that the time? I think I need to go have a cup of tea now." But we weren't condescending anybody. We weren't putting anybody down. We weren't trying to say we were better than anybody. We were just trying to make people laugh. And people really need to get a funny bone back quick because things are going downhill big at the moment. Oh, sorry, we're not being political or religious. You told me
no,
that.
that's fine. That they need to get a funny bone. I mean, I thought that I heard. What's weird too is I could have sworn when I was on YouTube once that I heard that Swedish Chef was actually pretty popular in Sweden. Like they thought he was hilarious. So that's why I always used to be like, I was like, eh. I just remember though your comment earlier. I was thinking about this whole time of same thing with the Muppet Christmas Carol is the ability to sell that you're talking to the Muppets that they're there were the best episodes, and there were just times that there were people that came on there and they really got into it, and there were other times that the actor would just be looking kind of at the camera and trying not to look over here because they didn't want to look down under, like you said, the stage. And you could tell they were just like, I can see the person. I thought Christopher Reeves did a really good job. That was another one of my favorites. I thought Christopher Reeves did a great job with Miss Piggy.
What was it? Animal doing Fever with the female singer. I can't think of her name now.
Had
fever. I got the fever all through the night. That was complete gold. That was from beginning to end. Because they got the two of them were just having the best time ever. So
there were times that it was really sold that you were just like, man, this whoever it was, you could tell they were a fan because there were some people came on there that like it's amazing to see the celebrity that seems to be starstruck to be with Miss Piggy or Kermit that they're just like I'm here with Miss Piggy.
Yeah, it is. The actress was Rita Moreno.
That was it. Yeah,
Rita Moreno. I think the Star Wars is my favorite episode by far, but I think the one with Vincent Price was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was good. Vincent Price. I miss Vincent Price.
But my second favorite has to be the one with Alice Cooper. Oh my gosh, the Alice Cooper episode was hilarious. I mean, they went dark with it, with him like pretending to be working for Lucifer and trying to lure Piggy. I mean, it was dark and it was edgy at the time. And
that was the time. There were many Midwestern Christians who thought that he was working for the devil. You know, it was. And they were making fun of it, but there was a lot of people who were believing it at the time. So
exactly, and if you're able to make fun of yourself, then that just makes you a more creative comedian or performer, because you're not taking yourself seriously, but you're just taking some of those flaws or some of those stereotypes and creating entertainment that's either going to be a shock value, which is kind of what that was, or you can use it to perform other things. But you had mentioned Howard the Duck. I definitely wanted to go back to that because you actually were the head operator of Howard the Duck in that film, were you not?
I was the master puppeteer. There were 5 of us. I just did a Howard the Duck Zoom convention.
Cool.
It was Ed Gale was in the suit. And then I was the master puppeteer, so I operated the mouth and did the guide track for the dialogue. And Steve Sleep operated the eyes. Peter Baird also helped operate the head. Lisa Stirs helped me with arm movements when we used the hand puppet, and Mary Wells.
Wow!
So there were 5 of us doing it. I was actually brought over because of my animatronics work. They'd been working for 7 months to make the duck. And it was a woman, that was Rick Baker's wife, Elaine Baker, who had been hired to build the duck. And they'd been working on it for 7 months, and they didn't have a duck that actually worked. So George went to Phil Tippett and he says, Phil, what are we going to do about this? You know, we're getting ready to shoot. We don't have a duck that works. And Phil said, well, you need somebody like that guy that did Akbar, you know, the one that made Akbar into a puppet and all that. He was great. Why don't you find somebody like him? Well, where is he? I don't know. I think he's in England. Well, get him over here. And so then they contacted me in England. And with 1 month to go, I came over with a Polish friend of mine, Tad Szynovsky, and we completely rebuilt the duck. We built a puppet version as well, because I like working with puppets for close-ups. And then I got to operate the duck for the next 9 months.
Wow.
And it was one of the hardest things I ever did, due to lack of sleep mainly, but also the one that I'm most proud of, because there were several flaws with Howard. My first one was when they're trying to talk me into coming over. They sent me 10 copies of the Howard the Duck comic, and I instantly fell in love. I didn't know anything about him. I instantly fell in love with the character. And then I got there and saw their duck, and I said, "Okay, so where's Howard?" "Oh, well, we didn't think a cartoon would work in a movie with live actors because they hadn't done Roger Rabbit yet. They hadn't done, anyway."
Right.
So this was he had to be more humanoid. He couldn't be a duck. And I said, "Well, if he doesn't look like Howard, you've already killed your core audience because it's going to be all the Howard the Duck comic book fans who are going to be the first ones to come see your movie."
Exactly.
So anyway, who listens to me? I'm just the guy brought in to fix it. And we worked very, very hard. I'm very proud of how we worked with the duck, that I wasn't allowed to change and kept them alive in every shot in the movie so that you believe it's the duck and not think about the person operating the duck.
Right.
But it was a flawed piece, yes. Actually, I got stuck in an elevator with Stan Lee. I was at a convention. And the fan said, "Have you talked to Stan yet?" And I said, "No, why should I talk to Stan?" "Well, you were his first Marvel character ever be made into a movie, So I said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Okay." So I get back to the hotel. I see the elevator doors closing. I jump into the elevator so I don't miss that trip up.
Right.
And I'm in the elevator with Stan Lee. And at that moment, all I could think of to say was, "I was the first Marvel character you ever had on the movies. I did Howard the Duck." And he just glared at me and he didn't talk to me all the way up in the elevator. And I bought the autobiography of Stan Lee and read that because Howard the Duck was so unsuccessful, he was out in California trying to turn his Marvel characters into movies. And because Howard the Duck was so unsuccessful, it took him another 10 years before anybody picked up another Marvel character to make into a movie. So I was a guy that kept him out of work for 10 years. No wonder he didn't talk to me in the elevator.
So you jumped on the
Wow.
elevator. Oh, that's got to be amazing. You jump in the elevator and go, "Remember that really bad thing that happened? That was me." And he's
I
just
was the one
like,
responsible for the worst thing that ever got done to one of your puppet characters.
"You
Yes.
weren't, though." I agree with you that misstep. I can't stand it when people go, "Let's change the design." We're not even going to talk about these days of how far they're going with changes. Oh, man, it's so hard to avoid these
Oh yeah,
subjects.
Sonic was wild. But yeah, it's unfortunate because
Let's take the idea and then throw it out the window and make our own thing, but we're going to keep the title. Yeah.
I mean, the first test is that the first thing as humans, I'll try to keep this quick, and I've been told I don't, but I'm going to try. The first thing, though, you're 100% correct that the first thing is visual. The first thing when somebody goes, "This is this character," is you're going to look at it, and then you're either going to go yes or no. And from there, it's a downhill if they fail test one. If you look at that and go, "That's not that character," now they've got to really pull off voice, mannerisms, acting, and everything else to pull you in.
So I
Otherwise,
was
you've
going to say
already
that
lost all
voice
the
isn't
fun.
coming out of that character.
Yeah.
right.
You don't do the voice for the character. They tell you what voice they want
Mhm.
because you have to believe that voice when you're watching the monitor. And if you don't believe that voice, it's not the right voice.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
then it just keeps going because once you lose that recognition, you're divorced from the lore, which means now you're trying to sell people on something new because it's just like with like Spider-Man. The thing I have to give for the last few Spider-Man movies, one of the series not so much, but the last one, the very last one, and the I don't know who that name. I forgot the name of the little actor, but was when I looked at it and I said Tom Holland. Yeah. Tom Holland's, is that the last one and the one? But what about the one before that, though?
Andrew Garfield,
No, before that. I'm sorry, Garfield never sold me.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland's won huge points because when I saw them, I said, "Yeah, that's Peter Parker," and we're rolling. We're rolling because I said, "Okay, This is Peter Parker." Nothing against Garfield. When I saw Garfield, I said, "That's not Peter Parker," and I felt bad because the movies weren't bad. But it wasn't Peter Parker, so from that point on, it was just the best they could do was tread water. They already, they're now just like, we're trying to keep above water. But when they sold me a Peter Parker, I could forgive a lot once I said, "It's Peter." oh, that scene could have been, well, it's Peter. You know, like, you win a lot of points on just getting that first thing right. Once you get the first thing right, your people's tolerance level is a bit higher. But once it's not, and then I'll stop there. Like I said, once it's not, you're just going, nah.
And the actor you like probably asked for a raise, which is why he didn't do the next movie. So
that usually happens quite a bit. I think Spider-Man 3 might have did it for Tobey Maguire. That wasn't all his fault, though. That movie, Venom actually wasn't sold. Like, oh my God. I was like, no, that's not Venom. Like, that is, whoa. There's a perfect example. They took another really popular character, and I looked at it and said, that's not Venom. But on the flip side, I love Doc Ock. Oh, man, I thought Dr. Octopus was so well done. I love the actor. I said, that's Dr. Octopus. And, the Otto Octavia said, it's like, okay, it's amazing what you'll tolerate once they get this the first step right. When you look and you go, I recognize that character, they can even mess up or the dialogue can be a little bad, but you're a little more tolerant because, again, submersion. You're not seeing the actor, you're seeing the character. And look at that. Look at that. We went back to that point. Just like with your puppeteering, like I said, when a person looks at it and forgets it's a puppet, you've won already. That's the ultimate victory.
Yep.
Speaking of victory, we're going to switch over to my favorite topic, which is Star Wars. And
he keeps trying to go to Star Wars. Come on, let's just keep talking.
Yeah, we're 40 minutes in. We haven't even gotten.
Let's talk about the Muppet status.
But no, as a kid, I really enjoyed Howard the Duck as a kid, and I watched it multiple times. I remember when we got a copy of the video, I probably almost tore the tape. I watched it so much, so I enjoyed it. So you sold me on the character, but at the end with the portal and the demons coming across, that always creeped me out as a kid.
That was okay. We can tie that into Star Wars. When I was working in the workshops with Phil Tippett building the characters for Return of the Jedi, he said to me then, because Phil's thing was to be a stop action animator. He had his own little Go Motion thing that he was working on to improve stop action, so stop action animation could stay alive and in the business. And he said, Tim, what I've always wanted to do was build a character that was so scary that when he comes on, you go, ah, like that. And then go, oh, you thought that was scary? Guess what? That's not even my face. And the character that shows at the end of Howard the Duck that comes up out of the light transformer thing, that's exactly what he does. He comes up and you think you're looking at the face of the character, and then the face rolls up on top of that and is even more scary. So Phil finally got to do that was one of his ambitions. It's nice, you never get paid for any of this stuff, so it's nice to at least get your ambitions in there on screen. So
he was successful, that's for sure. But I just remember that creeping me out as a kid. So he was spot on with what his intentions were.
He wanted to scare you.
He did.
I want you to watch this from behind the sofa.
For me, that'll always be Pee-wee's Big Adventure moment. I'm sorry. My childhood trauma will always be. And when they pulled him out, it looked like, and I remember like to this day, as an adult, I tried to watch that scene again, and I actually found myself tensing up, knowing it was coming on. Like, that was a great, like, claymation moment where I was just, because I didn't see it coming. Like, you're just like, oh, wow, this is kind of spooky. And then as a kid, I was just like...
Funny story about Large Marge, and I'm gonna make this quick, but I definitely want to get into Star Wars with Mr. Rose. But in junior high, we're trying. In junior high school,
we're gonna have to hurry because I got a guy coming to buy my tent this afternoon. So
I'm running out of time.
But in junior high school, my bus driver looked just like Large Marge. I mean, could pass for Large Marge. And one of my best friends, God rest his soul, he died when I was a senior in high school, would recite the entire line that Large Marge had made in that movie, but would change it to a school bus type theme. And he got suspended because he kept calling her Large Marge. But fitting image of Large Marge. All right, General Akbar.
Admiral.
Admiral.
Sorry, Admiral. My apologies.
General's there. Admiral's up there.
Yeah. And Admiral Akbar, probably one of the most notable characters in the original trilogy. But we also got to see you in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And Admiral Akbar is a very iconic character. Probably one of the, other than R2D2 from a puppeteer perspective, is probably one of the most notables in my opinion. You also did Salacious Crumb, which was my favorite character from Jabba's palace. I love the Quacky Monkey lizards. They are absolutely phenomenal, and the laugh is hilarious. And then you did Slice.
I never knew he was a Quacklian monkey lizard until a fan told me at a convention. A lot of this stuff gets added in after the fact, long after we've done the thing.
Really? Well,
It's a great name, though.
Oh,
I love the one, isn't it in Mandalorian, where they got one of them spinning on the spit and the Mandalorian's having him for dinner or something?
Well, there's one on a spigot and there's one in a cage watching it on the spigot and it's kind of freaking out in terror.
Yeah, I want to see that. I haven't seen that yet, but I've been told about it.
I think it's the first episode, if I'm not mistaken. But Admiral Akbar, I'm going to just let you go because I know you got some great stories about working on the set of Star Wars.
Yeah, well, I was working with Phil Tippett. I mentioned the name Elaine Baker, who had been working on making Howard the Duck. I worked on a film called Lord Greystoke, and Elaine Baker was quite instrumental in getting me fired off that movie. But the other thing that got me fired off it was I was trying to convince them the standard California thing at the time was you had a full body costume, but because you got the person in the costume, it doesn't leave much room for the animatronics. So they would now take the head and shoulders of the character and mount it on a tabletop and stick 60 cables inside of it and make the eyebrows go and the eyes blink and the cheeks move and the mouth move and all that sort of thing. But I was trying to talk Rick Baker into, instead of mounting it on a table, let me make that gorilla a puppet. Because as soon as you start moving the character around in frame, you don't need as many mechanical movements because you don't see him once he's moving. But I got fired off of that. Elaine Baker helped get me fired off of that. And when I went to work for Phil Tippett, I was looking at what they were doing, and they had the full bodysuit characters, and then they were building the close-ups on the tabletop the same way as Rick Baker was doing it. And I was saying, well, guys, at Muppets, you see, we've started doing things a little bit differently, and it's more about the movement than it is about just how many cables you can cram inside the head. And I picked up the character who wasn't Akbar yet. He was just one of the alien characters. And we had a little video set up, and I just started playing around with it, sticking my hand into the mouth features of it and everything, and moving it around to the camera and everything. And Phil Tippett, fortunately, saw that what I was saying actually had some value and some credence, and he allowed me to run with it. So I was able to make the full bodysuit version of Akbar, but I also made the hand puppet, which is the one that does the majority of the performance in the movie. And we did a lot of rehearsal to get it all really right. And then I brought it in and I showed the director what we had rehearsed. And he said, okay, turn over camera, let's shoot that. So when you say that I was sort of on set performing it, my involvement was far deeper.
Yeah, absolutely.
far greater than just somebody who'd been hired to come in and hold a suit up. So I'm very proud of that, which is why I went that far in the description of everything. So.
I know, that was awesome. Well, see, that's all you needed was just the absence of Elaine Baker, and then you were able to do what you needed to do.
Well, like I said, she was on Howard the Duck.
Mm-hmm.
And when they brought me in there with Tad, we were there for less than a week. And I was working in the workshop where Elaine Baker was. And I came to work one day and Elaine Baker wasn't there because the producers had decided that Tad and I were doing such a fabulous job that we didn't need Elaine anymore. So
Oh.
she now got fired. But she was convinced that because she got me fired off Greystoke, that I had some sort of vendetta out and I was trying to get rid of her. And I was so busy trying to make a duck, I wasn't even thinking about Elaine Baker. But she was convinced that I had gotten her fired.
Wow.
So I now had a month to finish building a duck in, a crew of 30 people, every one of which had been hired by Elaine Baker,
Oh.
who now thought I was the guy that made her get fired.
Wow.
So to say things were difficult, it wasn't exactly a Muppet style, let's all work together and make magic kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Man, Muppet
Anyway.
trauma.
I only got on Return of the Jedi because my friend Mike, we'd worked on Dark Crystal together and we'd worked on Labyrinth. And he and Tony McVeigh were making the character Salacious Crumb. And Salacious Crumb, they didn't think that Jim was recognizing them enough at Muppets, so they left and went to California to basically sell as much Muppet stuff as they could to the California guys. You know? So when they were making Salacious Crumb, their concept was, what would Kermit the Frog look like if he'd taken too many steroids? And that's how they came up with the character of Salacious Crumb. Because if you were to take the skin off Salacious and the skin off of Kermit, they are exactly the same. The bodies, the way they're operated, manipulated, were exact copies of each other.
Wow.
So anyway, Mike was doing the Cy Snoodles character, which I eventually redesigned and did as a reverse string marionette. And then George took her out and put in the CG character because he didn't like my character. But Mike had made her as a classic marionette, and she was about 4.5 feet tall and weighed 60 pounds. And he was up on a scaffold seeing if how it would operate. And he lost his balance and he fell off the scaffold and broke his arm. So he could no longer work in the workshop and he couldn't puppeteer either. So he called me up and said, Tim, if you can get out here straight away, maybe you can get a job on this movie and replace me. So if he hadn't fallen off the scaffolding, I wouldn't have worked on Return of the Jedi or Blue Harvest, Horror Beyond Imagination, as it was at the time, at all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been there.
Cy Noodles did disappoint me when they replaced the whole the band scene in Return of the Jedi. As a fan, I didn't think that was really necessary. I liked the original music as opposed to what they changed it to. But I thought she was a very unique alien in Return of the Jedi. It was actually that's the very first one I saw in the theater was Return of the Jedi because when I was in '77, I was 2 years old, so I didn't see that nor Empire. But I remember going to watch that, and I was just wowed by Jabba's palace and the laugh of Salacious Crumb just to this day cracks me up. But yes, I think Sykes Noodles does not get enough appreciation because it is a very brief moment in Jabba's palace. But you guys put a lot of work into that character just for the few moments of screen time it actually has.
Yeah, and unlike Jim Henson, who would give you 30 takes to get a magic moment, Richard Markram, we rehearsed Cy Snoodles, but her dance performance, the floor had train track slots in it, and you had to do the performance. You had to go in one set of slots and then back up into another set of slots and then come forward and down in the first. So technically, it was extremely hard to get the performance right. And all you had to do was catch one of the lines on the edge of a slot, and it would make her go twang, and she would just sit there and not look believable or real.
Right.
Well, we got it to the point, it was Mike Quinn and I, we did it together. We got it to the point where we could get a really good performance 1 out of 12 takes. We did the first take and the director said, moving on. And I just came out from underneath her and said, oh, please, God, no, do not make that the take that goes on to the cinema. Give me another chance, please. And he gave me take two, which was better than take one, but it wasn't the 12th take. So I don't
Right.
fully blame George for replacing her. But if they just had a little bit of patience,
Yeah.
we could have given him a performance that they wouldn't have needed to replace at all.
Yeah, and
But I was not in a position to tell anybody what to do. So
oh, absolutely. And as a Star Warsaholic that I am, I have noticed that Mr. Lucas loves tinkering with his films. Whenever there's new
yeah.
release, he changes this, changes that. Let's make it better. So I don't know if
Well, you
there's any
got to remember, ILM was a special effects house.
right.
They just didn't do their own movies. They did everybody's movies.
Right.
They went to the Academy Awards every single year, and they would go, "Okay, whose turn is it? Who hasn't picked up an award yet? Oh, well, you go. You might not have worked on that one, but you go pick up that award." Because they had so many effects in so many movies that they did it. I often blame I still call them 4, 5, and 6, even though they're the first 3 movies now. You know, I I feel that where they got ruined was they got carried away with the CG effects.
Yeah.
But of course, what they were doing was they were using those movies as an advertisement for what ILM was capable of. So of course they were totally over the top and
Yeah.
okay, CG can do anything. It doesn't mean you need to, guys. Less is more in the world of CG, but and they just went so far into showing off what they could do, they forgot to tell a story as far as
Well, it's not.
I was concerned on it.
That's true too, but the whole song and dance routine in Jabba's palace that was replaced in the 90s didn't feel Star Warsy. It felt out of place. So because I remember in the very first cantina scene, the music and stuff from the Bith, that was what we were kind of introduced to. And so in Jabba's
Mm-hmm.
palace, you had the band playing. It was in the same vein of music. So that's what we understood as Star Wars musical entertainment. But when they went way overboard and the whole big lips thing and the massive eyeballs with sliced noodles, that just it creeped me out more than anything. So I didn't
And
appreciate that.
Kirk Thatcher, I worked with in the workshop when we were building the stuff in pre-production. He always thought that he should perform Salacious Crumb. And of course, when they reshot things in the 90s, they didn't bother to bring me back because it was just a puppet. Why do you have the puppeteer for it? So Kirk Thatcher did
Mhm.
did the performance for some of those shots that you see in the revamped version of all of that.
Yeah.
And you can tell because he's actually a terrible puppeteer. And when the puppet's just going like that wasn't me, that was him. So just like to,
You
I
know,
just like to say that wasn't my performance.
I would love for Disney to put on Disney Plus the original unedited 1977, 1979, and 83 versions of the original trilogy. No changes. What we saw in the theater to be able to see the original performances before all the edits, because now my kids know nothing.
I've got them on a DVD. They have done a DVD release
Did they?
where
Okay.
you can see the original with the new one. Yes.
Yeah, because even just the whole scene where Han and Greedo were together, it's so choppy. I can't make sense of it. But yes, Han
Paul
talks.
just had his birthday, so I'm, I'm good friends with Paul. He lives down here in Dorset. So
Oh, do you? That's cool.
who shot first?
Han.
Han.
Han shot first.
Han shot
Yeah,
first.
there's a wonderful thing on the internet that shows all the different versions and how they changed it to make Han a nicer guy.
And
In
Han
the
is
beginning, he just blew the guy away because he was just an alien, but who cares? But then when we started caring about aliens, that's when they had to sort of start messing around with the timing on things. Yes.
But no, I mean Han is a cold, calculated survivor, and that's what he is. He finds a way to make it through, whether it be through action or through conversation. I love the way in Harrison Ford portrayed the character in The Force Awakens is I'll talk my way out of it, you know, and that's what he does sometimes. Otherwise, he has a blaster. Um,
Yep.
but getting back to Admiral Akbar, I see that you're credited in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Were you on set for those, or were you just credited for the character's actions? I was just
I,
curious.
I I think of just about all of the Star Wars characters who are in suits. I am the only one who was always Admiral Akbar.
Yes.
Unlike Darth Vader, who had 7 different people at some point doing Darth Vader,
Yeah.
I was the only one to ever play Akbar. It was quite funny because I was at a convention in Australia, and the fans were saying, "Oh, I hear they're going to do Force Awakens. Is Admiral Akbar going to be in it? Are you going to do it again?" And I just laughed and I said, "Well, I'll tell you guys, they don't exactly keep me in the loop of what they're planning on things.
Yeah.
I'm pretty far down the pecking order, you know." And if Admiral Akbar is going to be in the movie, they're going to get somebody who was my age when I did Akbar, which was about 24. They're not going to ask an old man like me to be in it.
Mhm.
Well, next thing I know, they're asking me. It was BB-8 who was responsible for getting me back in as Akbar because Brian Herring was also in charge of all the collecting all the puppeteers and suit performers over here in England. And he insisted with Neil Scanlon that if Akbar was in the movie, then Tim Rose should be in Akbar.
Right.
So they contacted me, said, "Would you be in Akbar again?" I said, "Of course I would." And then as soon as I got off the phone, I ran up to the workshop and pumped up the tires on my bicycle and started doing some serious mileage. I, if I was going to be back in one of these full body suit characters, I didn't want to die in there because it is extremely physically demanding, even for a 24-year-old. So for a 58-year-old, I think was what I was at the time when I went back in, it was worse. I discovered my claustrophobia has gotten worse with age.
I can only imagine. Now, Eric Bosserfield did the original voice of Akbar. Unfortunately,
Eric Bowersfeld.
yeah. And Tom Kane did the voice in The Last Jedi. And I know
Because
he's,
Eric was now dead, yes.
yeah, Eric passed in 2016, but Tom Kane had a stroke. I think it was in 2020, and he's in poor health. So it's interesting because Tom Kane.
Good thing they killed Akbar, eh?
Well, there's
Don't
I
have to
generally
find somebody to do the
disagree.
voice then.
well that's true too, but there's all you never know with Star Wars. They like going backwards and forwards in time, and you never know. They may be some more
Prequels.
Akbar action at some point.
I'd like to do one of my own voices one time.
I would love for you to do the voice of Akbar.
My Salacious Crumb, the laugh was much better and much more sinister than Mark's was. But basically, when you're doing the characters, you're in the suit, so all you can do is a guide track because it's right there, so it's not going to be good enough to use.
Right.
And they weren't going to bring me from England all the way to California just to voice over something. So Mark, who is Salacious, he although he works as a voiceover artist now, at the time that he did that Salacious Crumb laugh, he was working as a carpenter at Lucasfilm Ranch. And one of the editors came out of the office and somebody had told Mark a joke and he went, and I said, "Excuse me, young man, could you step in here for a minute?" He already had the laugh, so it was just a matter of teaching him how to be a voiceover artist then. So
That's
he
funny.
copied my laugh, so he got the job.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. Salacious's laugh is definitely iconic. Um,
Do you know
but
why he laughs like that?
no, I don't.
I said, "So I'm puppeteering this character in the movie," and George came around. He used to always come into the workshop at night because he liked seeing how we were getting on with the characters and everything. And I was there. He looked at the character. He said, "This character, I think his name should be Salacious Crumb." And I said, okay, what would you like me to do with him? Well, we want you to puppeteer him. You're a puppeteer. So that was the sum total of my direction for what to do with the puppet characters. So I thought, okay, he's called him Salacious Crumb. So I looked Salacious up in the dictionary because I wasn't really sure what the word meant. And it said something like one who gets enjoyment from the misfortunes of others. So I said, okay, Salacious by name, Salacious by nature. And that's when I made him into the cheerleader for the Rancor Pit Monster. It's like, oh yeah, listen to Bones Crunch. you know, and he really enjoyed watching other people being hurt. So
Now,
he was a very nasty little character. If anything, they cutified him up for the children in relation to how I played him originally.
yeah, his middle initial is B. Do you know what the B stands for?
Yes, it
It's
doesn't stand for
hilarious.
anything.
No,
It cracks me up. It's actually in the Disney books now. That came when I would finish work at 10 o'clock at night. I was so wanting to prove that not just could I build these things, but I could also puppeteer them, that I would go in and set up a video monitor and I would rehearse with Salacious in a back room. And these VHSs that I shot in the back room, I thought I had managed to delete and destroy them all, but I obviously hadn't because they got used in some of the very first behind the scenes stuff that was shot. So I was puppeteer, lighting man, cameraman. I was the whole shebang because I was shooting it for my own amusement to see how to do the character. And it had to do with Hanna-Barbera characters. They always seem to have a three-part name, you know, they always seem to have a middle initial. So while I was just talking to myself on the monitor, saying, hello out there in TV land, this is Salacious B. Crumb. And I just made that bit up, but for some reason, because it got into the behind the scenes stuff, it now has ended up in the book as part of his name. But I just was making it up to entertain myself at 11 o'clock at night. So that's where the B came from.
and they finally filled in the B with a word, which they now named it Salacious Breadcrumb, which I thought was interesting. Um,
I would have said Salacious Busterfield Crumb, but there you go. Okay.
well, you created it, so you can always rename it. Um, they
I
had
don't think Disney would allow me to have any say whatsoever in the situation.
they had Mark Dodson on a show that I listened to, and I think that's where I heard that was from Mark Dodson on that show. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's when I started because Mark and I both signed to the same character. He always writes Cycrum, and I
Cypher.
started putting Salacious B Crumb to separate our two signatures and characters.
Absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly happy to share. The
Oh yeah.
character is who he is because of what all of us did. You know, the Akbar was as good as he was because I was only 24 years old. So even if they brought me out of the suit and let me do a clean track to camera, it would have sounded like a 24-year-old trying to sound like a 56-year-old because I was playing, you know, anybody who is in that position as Akbar, he's going to be late middle aged, if not ready for retirement, you know. And so Eric Bowersfeld, his voice, because he was already that age, just finished it off. You know, it made the character what it needed to be that I couldn't have done. I could do it now, but I couldn't have done it then as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So that's what's magical about the animatronic characters is they are themselves because they aren't anybody else. They're just a compilation of everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is a puppet is not just one person pulling the strings. So I do want to touch on Akbar's probably most famous line with "It's a trap." Do
Yeah.
you have any interesting stories or background on where that came to be?
No, it was just one of the lines that we did.
One of
I'm really happy that the fans picked up on that. We could not withstand firepower of that magnitude, because that would take forever to write on photographs.
but
They
yet,
all wanted to trap on their photograph, and it's much easier to write. So I'm very happy with that.
Just
yeah,
all
it's become
caps.
such
Actually,
a
I'll tell you what I'm the proudest of about Akbar. When we shot all the dialogue and everything that was in the script, Richard came around and said, "Right, the rebels have destroyed the Death Star. You know, we've won. We want to just shoot camera angles, stuff that we can edit in. We want everybody to celebrate that we've won the war." Now, I'm 65 years old now. So at the time we were doing this, as I said, I was about 24, and I came within that much of getting my lottery number called up to be drafted to Vietnam. So I had very strong feelings about war in particular at the time.
maybe
And
so.
one of them was that I think we should be proud of what we achieve in a war, but it's not something you celebrate. I mean, it's not something you're happy about. You know, it's something you can be proud of without being happy about. So when they set up the shot with me looking out the window and I'm supposed to jump out of I've just seen the Death Star blow up. I'm supposed to jump out of the chair and run towards the camera with my hands in the air, all waving and everything. And I thought about my feelings of war. I thought about the guys that tried to drop the bomb down the shaft and didn't because they got blown up. I thought of all the guys on the Death Star who just made the mistake of working for the wrong company, kind of like working for Disney, you know what I mean? And a lot of people had to die for not a lot of good reason. And when I thought about it, and they said turn over, the Akbar character just kind of slumped down in the chair. The whole weight of it just made me feel not good. So director screamed, "Cut!" And he came over and said, "I told you to jump up and dance around the room," and all that sort of thing. And I said, "Sir, you got Akbar's performance. If you want a calamari to jump around the room, you can put somebody else in this costume." And that was one of the few times when I stood my ground and refused to do what I was being told. And it stayed in the movie, and I'm very proud of that. So,
It's almost like the whole weight of the war is now over, and you can kind of relax a little bit, but also it was touched on, I think, in The Mandalorian with Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, where they're talking about the somebody died in the Death Star. She's like, which one? But you got to remember, we blew up two of them, so you had thousands of people twice instantaneously die in each Death Star destruction. So, and you're right, it's not something to celebrate all that, especially that large amount of death. But being able to stop,
somebody was just there because the toilets needed cleaned. You know, they were they
or
they
and
weren't all they
and a
weren't
lot of
all
right, and a
horrible.
lot of them were you spoke of being drafted in Vietnam. A lot of them were conscripted or forced into their roles. So it was not like they chose the wrong side; they were unfortunately forced into the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's really kind of refreshing, your interpretation of how the character would feel once that happened. So thank you for sharing that story. That's a very powerful
And I
and
sent
fascinating.
people out to get blown up too. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a fun thing to do.
No, at least Wedge made it back. Dennis Lawson is this character is the only one that has two Death Star stickers on his X-wing.
But what about Portkins? What about Portkins?
I keep waiting for a Rogue Squadron with Jack Porkins in it. I can't wait for that.
R.I.P.
I
Portkins.
used to have two of his toys signed,
Did you really?
but I gave both of them away to people who were far greater Star Wars fans than I was. He was a great guy. I was glad to got the chance to meet him. So.
Yeah, his X-wing's destruction scene was actually recycled for Return of the Jedi. It's this exact same scene of an X-wing going down on the Death Star.
Hmm.
So it's another small bit of little trivia there for everybody. Um, I'm going to include your Admiral Akbar website on our YouTube page so all the fans can.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
We want them to be
Yes,
able.
you can read on there the story everybody always wants to hear and how Salacious Crumb got fired by Harrison Ford. But it's a long story, so it's better just to read it than it is to try and set it all up. You have to
Oh,
understand it
absolutely.
all.
Yeah, but I'll definitely include that on there. And want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know it's later in the afternoon for you, but getting Q up this early was almost like pulling teeth. But when I told him we have Admiral Akbar coming on board, he made sure to set his alarm clock and get up to come speak with you this morning. So
It
thank you
took
very much
5
for your
tries
time.
to get up. It's not even a joke.